Peaceful coexistence. That's a goal to live for and work towards. That's for sure. May I ask, shall I continue with the introducing? Okay, very good. Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce Mustafa Akpinar. He's the CEO of Rumi Forum, and I invite him forward to share some opening remarks with us. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. What a beautiful night. We have a great crowd here. I just got here from Fairfax, was driving almost 2.5 hours. So when I see crowd like this, you always say it's worth it, even if it's a 5-hour drive. So thank you for being with us tonight. So it's such a pleasure to be here in Charlottesville among all of you for the annual Peace and Dialogue dinner. So since the founding in 1999, Rumi Forum hopes to bring together people from different backgrounds in order to foster intercultural dialogue, to stimulate thinking, and to exchange opinions to combat ignorance, and to contribute to a peaceful coexistence. So this is why the annual Peace and Dialogue dinner is so crucial to the development of our community. So by hosting this dinner, you are opening up doors to allow communication to flow freely and are raising awareness among all our community members that can celebrate both our commonalities as well as our differences without one diminishing the other. So the theme of this year's ceremony, Overcoming Xenophobia, Acceptance of Others, couldn't be more timely. So we are faced with an increasingly globalized world that is, sadly, often overshadowed by irrational fears of the other. So this fear or dislike stems from an ignorance of the unknown that oftentimes comes not from the fault of the individual, but rather from a failure of the society or community. So to overcome this ignorance, education is the key. So education transforms the unknown or the other, so into the known and even the friend. So education dispels the fear and replaces it with knowledge, truth, and acceptance. So education is a fundamental human right and essential for the exercise of all the other human rights. Education is vital for the promotion of peace and coexistence in the world. So education is not only important because it helps answer the tough life questions on how to live, how to work, or how to love, but it is very important because it teaches people how to understand and appreciate the world that surrounds them. So it can be a reasonable reaction for an individual who meets with a foreign culture or concept to feel skepticism and even fear. So however, as a community, we can overcome or preempt xenophobia by introducing dialogue and educating our communities. So in the words of our honorary president, Fethullah Gulen, a person is truly human if he or she learns and teaches and inspires others. So thank you for your support in continuing the conversation of understanding our fellow human being and working towards promoting a better humanity. So I hope you enjoyed this wonderful night. Thank you for joining us again. Thank you.
The next is our keynote speaker. Vaughan is someone who is very active in our communities. He's the president, CEO, and founding director of Virginia Foundation for the Humanities. He is the founding director of the South Atlantic Humanities Center and is a member of the faculty at the University of Virginia, where he has taught English for 35 years. He teaches in the School of Arts and Sciences, as well as in the Darden School, teaching MBA and executive education programs. Rob received his Bachelor of Arts from Washington and Lee University, and his other 2 degrees, a Master of Arts and PhD in English from the University of Virginia. He has served as a founder and president of the National Humanities Alliance. He's been the president of the Ashlawn Opera Festival, a vice president of it's called Solinet, the Southeastern Library Network, and has served as secretary of the American Shakespeare Center. He also serves on the boards of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Commission, Tupelo Press, and the Virginia Association of Museums, as well as Virginia's World War I Memorial Commission. And he is an advisory editor of the Virginia Quarterly Review and founding president of the Center for Nonprofit Excellence, a wonderful local organization. He is certainly engaged in our communities, enriching our lives in many ways. And please join me in welcoming Rob Vaughan with a warm welcome.
Thank you for having me here this evening. I've decided that my introduction was too long. I'm not even sure where it came from, because it was not something that I wrote. I think I can probably guess. There's somebody that works in my staff who probably wrote this up. I'm delighted to be here. I've heard enough about the Rumi Forum to know that I'm in very good company, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to join you. In many, many ways, your introduction to the Rumi Forum could almost parallel the kind of work that the Virginia Foundation has been doing in a sort of different arena along the way. But we were founded in 1974, and if I can just read you one paragraph here, and I think it's the last thing I'm going to read along the way. We started with an imperative to tell untold stories, and have been a driving force at VFH since we got underway. For example, in the beginning, we focused on the history, the cultural contributions of women, of the African American community, and of Virginia Indians along the way. Those became very high priorities for an original board that we created and that came into being in September of 1974. The priorities were very clear to all of these people. And we got underway first with the African American community, and we're still very active there. For example, there have been 150 Virginia Foundation programs on African American, on Black history and culture, just in the last year and a half alone. To give you some sense of what we're up to here. The next was the Virginia Women's Cultural History Project. At that point, we were looking at the history of Virginia women beginning 1600 through 1945. It was the first time that anybody in the state, and maybe even in the southern United States, had really taken a look at the contributions of women and their educational achievements, as well as the other kinds of achievements and roles they have played in research and all manner of arts, of culture, of humanities, of sciences in the United States, and laid out a research agenda for the understanding and development of women's culture in this state in particular. And then the third area of primary interest there for the time being was the Virginia Indian community. We worked with the 8 then recognized tribes recognized in Virginia. There are now 11 recognized tribes in the state. And we began with just meetings with them, and then from there brought together a conference of those 8 state recognized tribes who themselves discovered at the conference, as did we, that they had never been together since 1607.
Wow.
They had never met together. And it was a sort of astonishing moment for all of us along the way. Well, that was the beginning of the organization, or at least the priorities there at the beginning. But we have continued to work, and more recently to talk about ourselves and some of our priorities as global Virginia, and as a state of many nations, Virginia, a state of many nations, and then to sort of markers for us along the way. And interestingly, I moved to Virginia in 1950 when I was 6. I literally moved on my 6th birthday to one of the big, from a major American city, New York, to another major American city, Crewe, Virginia. About 1,000 people at most at that point along the way. It was a great blessing for a 6-year-old boy to move from the city into a place like Crewe, where you could leave the house at 5 in the morning and go anywhere you wanted to go and come back for dinner, if they could find you. But the role that the Foundation began to get more and more involved in these ways were programming that looked at this state in those ways. When I moved here in 1950, there was one Virginian out of every 100 who had been born in another state. Now, there's one Virginian out of every 10 who was born outside of the United States. That's a sea change in a relatively short period of time, and it continues to change. That 1 out of every 10 is going to become 2, and then 3, and then 5 out of every 10 on the way. And people from all over the world have been there. I'm going to begin with programming that we had just Sunday night. A film. We didn't produce the film, but we have been involved with Rosenwald Schools, the Foundation has, for a good 25 years now. And this was a film about Julius Rosenwald, who founded all of those Rosenwald schools, mostly throughout the southern United States. There were 5,375 of them that he funded individually and created the schools for black children along the way. Some of those schools were burned down, as you might expect at this period. But that film was really, if you've never seen it, you really ought to find it, because it's quite extraordinary. Julius Rosenwald himself was extraordinary along the way. This notion of being a state of many nations and diversity of programming that we have tried to create these many, many years, have sought to create. Obviously the purpose here is to get people together, doing what the Rumi forums are doing, to open the doors and to seek out representatives from everybody who is joining us in the United States, from wherever they come, whether that's Turkey, for example, or anywhere else in the country along the way. Bolivians, for example. Bolivians in Virginia are the second largest population of Bolivians in the world, behind Bolivia, obviously. And we were doing some programming with them on traditional Bolivian culture, on wind instruments, on dance. And at the Richmond Folklife Showcase in October a year ago, we had 200 Bolivians dancing at that Folklife Showcase in Richmond. If you haven't been to the Richmond Folklife thing, it's always in October, and it's really quite extraordinary. It's the largest Folklife program in the United States now. Richmond really took it on. Filipino community. The second largest Filipino community in the United States is in Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Chesapeake, Virginia. And that was news to me, and you would think, having lived in Virginia mostly since I was 6, I would know something that large in the state, but did not. And so we got involved with them as well. And most recently, we have a fellowship program. We had a fellow who teaches at Norfolk State University who was born in the Philippines, came to this country as a 2-year-old with her parents. Her father had been in the United States Navy, and they settled here. That's, in fact, the reason that many Filipinos live in Virginia Beach and North Chesapeake area of Virginia. They came and decided that they wanted to do something for the staff of the foundation, which is 42 people, and our fellowship program, which is another 8 or 10. and they brought the Filipino dinner and just served all of us along the way. This was extraordinary. I've yet to figure out how to thank them other than to keep thanking them for what they did along with what they did. So, we do a number of publications, one of which, actually, yesterday I was pulling out publications just to remind myself, and the stack was about like this, and I decided I couldn't carry them around. But I'm going to pass these two around because they're small. This is the book is called Echoes of Little Saigon. Most of you probably know if you've been in Virginia, that very, very large and very early immigration community from Vietnam. And they settled in Arlington, Virginia. We've been working there with that community, and this publication, I'll just send it around and make it back next time. And the second one is learning and thinking about China. And the Chinese, we've had a Chinese boy, for example, that grew up in China, came here to the United States. That's another of many, many publications. There are publications, Don't Grieve After Me, it's the history of Black community in the state of Virginia. At Commonwealth and Communities, the Jewish experience in Virginia, focusing largely on Richmond in that case, to lead and to serve an American Indian education program that took place at Hampton University beginning in the late 19th century. Southern Women's Cultural History, The Share of Honor, Virginia Women, 1600 to 1945, I just mentioned, and many, many more of these programs. We also do a large number of radio programs. If you've not found us through Backstory with the American History Guys or With Good Reason, both of these are weekly programs, hour-long programs that now have been worldwide. We even have donors who sponsor us from far, mostly in Europe, but also in Asia and Australia, for example. They don't tend to be million-dollar donors, but they tend to be regular. Regular is as good as $1 million if you're involved in fundraising of this kind. Another program that's fairly recent, by the way, performances and workshops, music and dance traditions of Veracruz, Mexico, for example. Bilingual publication based on exhibits on women's contributions to community development and social change in El Salvador and El Salvadoran immigrants. Multiple screenings and discussions of documentary films. Artists of Empire, for example, examining the root causes of Latin American immigration to the United States. A series of colored programs on Islam, featuring interfaith dialogues and the reflections of Islamic leaders in Roanoke, which has a fairly large Islamic community. A statewide series of colored programs, The State of Many Nations is what we labeled that, and that's where the title came from that I mentioned earlier. On the changing face of Virginia, involving leaders and other representatives from Salvadoran, Mexican, Bolivian, Ethiopian, Vietnamese, Palestinians, Sudanese, Iranians, Mongolians, Nigerians, Filipinos, Nicaraguans, Hondurans, Lebanese, Peruvians, and other Turkish immigrants, for example. To get that back into the question here. All of these kinds of things that we're working on here really are designed to get people related to each other and to welcome the increasing population from outside of this nation and the way that we are interacting, or in some cases, too many, not interacting along the way here. And we have plenty of recent examples of that. We've been involved in television production, South Asian literary festivals, for example, Lao Buddhist Temple in Catholic is right, Virginia, up in the Northern Virginia area. Lots of, well, one of the most fascinating to me was being a Mongolian man who makes masks, Mongolian masks, and a variety of other kinds of handworks, to the point that he has been had a whole exhibit in the Field Museum in Chicago, which is no small place, as I expect many of you know. The Loving Story, which a lot of you probably have heard about, in Caroline County, Virginia, the marriage of a white man and a white woman, and they're being arrested on their first night of their marriage, broken into the house and arrested along the way. That made its way to the national and Supreme Court case that they won along the way. We want to keep doing these kinds of things. We want to be involved with this organization and all of you in any way that we can. We're here in Charlottesville, but we are active all over the state of Virginia and even beyond in many places around the country. We're the largest organization of our kind in the United States, twice the size in any measure of staff or programming or financing or any of those kinds of things than California, which is the second largest. We're more than twice the size of that program out there. And we're very pleased with what we do, and we're excited to get involved with new people along the way. So I hope that you will consider joining us anytime you see an opportunity, that you can become part of the Virginia Foundation's work and through the forum. It's one more opportunity. I look around, I just look over to the right, and it's one of our staff members saying, nice to have you, Justin. Glad you could be here. And I hope that we can get involved with you along the way and get involved more of our staff. And the many people that I already know in this room, I was pleased to see. We are looking forward to the future. We're looking forward to a greater understanding and relationships with communities around this country, primarily in Virginia, but elsewhere as well. And we invite you to join us, and we invite ourselves to join you. Thank you very much.
Please know that there's coffee and other hot drinks over here on the side. You can move about and help yourself to the hot drinks as you wish. We're queuing up a videotape for our next story about coming together for the greater good. Another wonderful thought. Let me tell you a little bit about Mark Gibb as a form of introduction. And he's the former executive director of the Northern Virginia Regional Commission. Chosen by this regional commission to serve in April of 1987. He served as the commission's chief executive officer until very recently. And he was responsible for the implementation of plans and studies and projects designed by the commission. So he's a good implementer. Mr. Gibbs served several years as an adjunct professor of planning with the University of Virginia in the Northern Virginia Center. And prior to his appointment as director, Mr. Gibbs served as the executive director of the Kern Council of Governments, located in Bakersfield, California. So you're a coast-to-coast kind of person, I guess. This is wonderful. He served as an adjunct professor of public administration at California State College in Bakersfield. He's the former president of the Northern Virginia chapter of the American Society for Public Administration, and also a former member of its National Council for the Mid-Atlantic region. So a breadth of experience, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
We welcome you.
I'll just hold it.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Y'all better go this way.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you. What an honor it is to be here. The American Turkish Friendship Association Rumi Forum. I've been associated with this group now for 3 or 4 years. And they present some of the most valuable programs that I've been involved in. And I'll tell you a little bit more about this blanket drive in a minute. I was enjoyed my conversation with my table mates this evening, and found out I'm sitting next to one of the members of the Board of Supervisors here in Vaughan County. Is that right? So we had a really good discussion about things, and we were all introducing ourselves, where we're from. And it turns out we all have Virginia connections, but none of us are really from here originally. So that's interesting. And I'm actually a Virginian by birth. Actually, I was born in Arlington, Virginia, and went away for a number of years, and kind of like Rip Van Winkle, I came back and all of Northern Virginia grew up, and I'm still watching it grow up. But I remember when I actually came back came from California, and 28 years ago, I came back to Northern Virginia in Fairfax County. And my daughter, I remember, was in the 5th grade now. Now she's all grown up and married and so forth. But she came home from school in the 5th grade, first few days of school, and they had a competition, an anti-drug awareness day at school. They probably don't do this anymore, I don't know. But anyway, they did that way back in the Middle Ages when my daughter was going to school. And what they had is they had a program where you would get a clean T-shirt and bring it to school. They'd have some sort of iron-on thing. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it's not good. Okay. And so they said, get a T-shirt and come to school and we'll do an iron-on anti-drug awareness slogan. So I don't know how it was in your house, but there's nothing in our house where we have just a plain T-shirt. Always there's something written on the front or the back or something. But we found something and there's something written on the back. And said, take that, honey, take that, and that'll be fine. Well, she came home all excited with her new shirt. This is a true story. She came back and said on the front it has "Families are forever." On the back it now says, "Be smart, don't start." I didn't realize this until someone pointed it out to me. But it sort of defines what's happening in the world today. You know, we have these different signs. So what something says on the front can be completely different from what's on the back. And these issues that we see all over is that we have fears of different people. And it's really sad to see this because our country is based on those who come from all over the world. And yet, for some reason, we have these fears. Now, you know, I have started with some humor because I think that humor is a way of overcoming some of those issues. And I think that we got to have more humor involved in that. 3 years ago, let me just explain this blanket drive so you get a sense of it. And then I'll tell you where we're going. And I don't want to take too much time because it's 3 hours late already. But 3 years ago, a group of officials from Northern Virginia went to Turkey with the American Turkish Friendship Association, also with Rumi Forum. And we were invited there. It was a remarkable trip. And we learned a lot about this beautiful country of Turkey that some of us knew very little about. We had local elected officials, we had state elected officials, and so forth. We all have many memories, but what we most remember was going to a Syrian refugee camp in Adana, just outside of Adana, which we were invited firsthand to see. Now, we were there were about 25,000 people living in this tent city. And what we noticed most is that the vast majority were children under the age of 12 years old. And we were able to visit a host family in one of these tents, which was about a 10 by 10, tent. And in that tent there was a family, a father and a mother and 2 children. And this man was a policeman from Damascus, and now he was a refugee. And we asked him, you're in this tent, he has literally nothing, and so you don't even know what to say, can we do something for you? What can we do? And he said, this is through an interpreter, can you bring some blankets? It's getting cold. And so that's what started this blanket drive. And so we went home and decided, how are we going to do this? And we didn't know what we were doing, but very, very quickly we mobilized the local community and tried the business community and the religious community. And the first year we were fortunate enough to collect about a moving van and a half full of blankets. And we got the assistance of Paxton Van Lines. We also had Maersk Shipping to help us to donate their shipping cost, and it didn't cost us anything. And so we thought we were being very successful. And we did it the next year. The next year we collected a little over 2.5 moving vans of blankets and coats. And in 2015, we expanded our effort to include both blankets and coats. And we reached out to Northern Virginia because it extended beyond throughout the United States. We're getting calls from all over, from Boston, from Chicago, from North Carolina, even California said, can we help you with these blanket and coat drive? The results were absolutely amazing. We had 10 full moving vans full of blankets and coats for these refugees in Turkey. and we had to have 8 40-foot shipping containers from Maersk. They were a little stunned when we told them what we had this year. But I mean, you have to understand that, you know, the moving company Maersk Paxton took them an entire week to take it from Northern Virginia down to the Port of Virginia. 2 huge moving vans every single day transporting all of this precious cargo. And we knew we were really making a difference. It wasn't just a Band-Aid, we were really helping some people that needed help, and we had a chance to go back. And Mustafa was with us and we went back, and that coat you saw in that video, we were able to give it to a boy that was in a Syrian refugee school. And, there's a little video, if you want to Google that, you can find that and see that video as well. However, you saw the clip from the video. We did help people, but what it really did, the most important thing about this is that it brought our community together like no other effort I've ever been involved in. I can honestly say it's the best experience of my professional career, because we really brought the religious community together, the Christian community, we brought the Muslim community. What we didn't say in the introduction, I'm actually a bishop of my church in the Mormon church right now. We brought the Mormons, the Muslims, you know, the Christians, and the Jewish faith. It was just remarkable. And then we had the business community together, all working together on this, on something that we thought was very important. Now, unfortunately, as some of you well know, we're not able to continue that this year because of the political unrest in Turkey. We cannot continue our effort this next year. Many people are calling and saying, are we going to do it again? And we're now transforming all this energy. I had the director of the Muslim Relief call me directly and said, let's help the refugees in Northern Virginia, or in Virginia. Let's help them here. Let's collect what they need. And so we're working together with the Rumi Forum, once again, bringing the community together to help the community pull together. Now, we're just starting this. It will be interesting to see how it happens. We would invite you to be engaged with this as well. We would love for you to be involved in helping the refugee community throughout Virginia. I just wanted to say thanks to the AFTA and Rumi Forum for their efforts. This wouldn't have happened without them. And also tell you a little about this picture. You can see it, maybe you can hold it up so you can see it. It's always about people, folks. It's not about things, it's people. This gentleman here is the actual policeman that I'm talking about. His 2 children are the ones we met in their tent. The little girl there is holding a blanket that was made by my neighbor, and I presented it to her by the name of Daryl Smith. And by the way, they have no idea. There must be, 50 photographers there taking. They don't know what's going on. But anyway, this is the perfect picture because it has the Turkish flag in the background too. I don't know how we did that. How we do that? But it brought the elected officials together. It brought, again, and you see Mustafa, I think you're on that picture too.
Yeah.
And it really symbolizes what this effort was all about. Thank you. With one little story too. My youngest son, when he was, when we were in Fairfax schools, he was in the 1st grade, and he's now a doctor in Pennsylvania, so life goes on. But he came to me one day and said, Dad, here's my report card, and I don't know how it is in your schools, but we have O's and lower grades for outstanding, S's for satisfactory, and N's for not so good. I don't know what it is. You want to talk about it? Needs improvement, thank you. And so my son brought his report card to me, and under conduct he had an N. And so it just seemed impossible to me. And so I said to him, Brad, now, what's going on here? I said, why are you getting this grade? And he began to cry. He says, Dad, it's not my fault. I do my best, but this kid next to me is bothering me, and I tell him to be quiet, and the teacher always sees me, and I go, wait, hold it. I said, hold it. I don't want to hear this. I just want to know one thing. How are we going to change this grade? And he looked at me so sincerely. He said, Dad, we can't change it. The teacher wrote it in ink. Change is a very important thing. And change is what we need to do when we're dealing with our new friends from different countries and different communities. And these things are not written in ink. We can change these, the way we deal with people. And I invite all of you to participate as we help our new neighbors, our refugees from around the world. Thank you very much.
Just a little aside for blankets and refugees. My friend Victoria Parvin, who's here tonight, she is a native Hungarian, and when the refugees were coming into Hungary, she, being bilingual, went to Hungary to help out with the refugees. And I'm honored to know her for having done such a wonderful thing. So if you want to hear about some of those experiences, Victoria's here tonight, over right there. Okay, we've come to a wonderful time in our program with giving out awards and appreciation for the Art of Peace and Dialogue contest. So I'm going to invite Steve Kolazar to come forward. He's a county school board member. He's going to be the one presenting the awards, and that information is right on that table. And the children can be getting ready in their minds and hearts. And what I'm going to do is invite you up one at a time, each one in order, and then you'll get your award. But all of you stay here so that at the end we can take a photograph. Got to capture these special moments. So, if you, all the information is right over here, yeah? All right. Yes.
Our third place winner is Maya Weimer. Okay, yeah. Maya, you want to tell us which school you go to and what grade you're in?
I go to Buford Middle School. I'm in 8th grade.
And you want to tell us about your art?
I drew a bunch of hands making a peace sign. They're all different ethnicities, and I did that because I think that we can all work together to make peace and that we can all get along. And I also added in a gay wristband because I think that we should all have peace, not just between our different ethnicities, but also between different beliefs. And I also added, as a background, I tried to add the sun because they're reaching towards a goal, just representing that.
Okay. Our second second place winner is Bray May. Tell us what school you go to and what your grade is.
I go to Cleveland Middle School and I'm in 7th grade.
And would you like to tell us about your art?
My artwork is about how other people from different countries come together and play in peace.
Thank you. And our first place winner is Saul Park.
I go to Buford Middle School in 8th grade. And so I made a puzzle because I thought, when I heard it was about unity, I thought of a puzzle because, well, it's like unity because they all fit together in peace and stuff, and I think like our world should be like that. And so I drew doves with, one of them has an olive branch, which symbolizes peace, and then I made different ethnicity hands, making the puzzle, so.
Here's the
Who else wants to come in?
Thank you so much. And our closing remarks that will come from Ed Winkler, a pastor in the United Methodist Church, and he'll share his thoughts with us. Please, Ed.
Thank you. When you're a pastor, you're actually not used to people applauding when you come up. So. I want to say thank you to the Rumi Forum and to the Turkish American Friendship Association for the wonderful food and for bringing us together. And that's been, I've had a great time with my friends there at Table 4 and to see other folks. I first came in contact with Rumi Forum, gosh, some 10, 12 years ago in Arlington when I was a pastor there. And then I moved somewhere else. I came here and I've been here about 3 days and he's knocking at my door. And so I'm very glad for that. I have, for the last many years, my first career in community development, my last 17 years, ending last year when I retired in the ministry, had this question that has bothered me most of my life. How do we learn to live together? How do we learn to live together? Now I can go a long way, talk a lot on the Bible and what that says, but I'm going to try to distill it in whatever I hope wisdom I might have learned as a pastor and working in community development and being with people in all that time. And one is that we recognize differences, but we look for what we have in common. We have differences. I don't know how many languages are spoken here as first languages just in this room, but I suspect quite a few. When I lived in Arlington, I lived in zip code for a while, zip code 22204, which the Urban Institute did a study of. It called it the world in a zip code, because there were so many different languages spoken at Barcroft School, which was about 3 blocks from where I live. We learn to live together when we recognize we speak different languages, but what we have in common as people, we want to live in peace. We want to have a certain kind of prosperity. We don't have to be rich, but we want to be able to eat and have friends and things like that. We have these things in common. And maybe ways that we get to that are, first, to talk. To talk. When we talk to each other. There's a horror movie called The Village. If you've not seen it, I think only about 4 people in the entire country did, and I was one of them. But it's about a village that people don't go outside the village, and it's very well marked, you know, the red markings around it. And they call the people who they've never seen on the outside, the people of whom we don't speak. When we speak to each other, when we sit down and have conversations, even with difficulties of different languages, people change. That's my experience.
talk together and walk together. Pastor Wisco can tell you about organizations that she and I have worked together that bring together different faiths to solve problems here. Pastor Shisto, my friend, can tell you about an interfaith justice ministry. There are probably other folks here too. When we work together, walk together, we learn to live together better. And last, eat together. You can't be mad at somebody when you're eating with them. It's just simple as that. So in my sort of pastoral role, I want to send you off in peace, to see differences, but to see what we have in common, to talk together, to walk together, and eat together. Go in peace, friends. Thank you, Rumi Forum and American Heritage.